So my Autobomber in the Last Epoch has reached level 62. I have reached the end game well and truly, and I started clearing out Echoes, I have unlocked Monolith, I started basically doing the end game mapping that would be known as end game mapping to Path of Exile players. So today we're going to talk about the respec that I've done, about two different gearing options that have kind of occurred to me, and will also give you an idea of how you can gear your Autobomber, slight change in skills that I'm doing, and maybe a couple of tips here in between. And what I'm also foreseeing for you while I have your attention is that there probably will be another check-in on this particular Autobomber slightly further into the end game. As I get deeper into the maps, as I am around level 70, maybe 75, something like this, in about another 10 levels, if I make any further changes or encounter some other substantial changes to this build. If you're enjoying this, please support the growth of this content on my channel. Channel has grown enough, but this content of Last Epoch is not particularly known. So could you please help the YouTube algorithm and me promote this content by liking the video, maybe commenting below, letting me know how you're building your character and if this inspired you to try something new. Thank you. Alright, so we're not going to revisit what I told you about leveling. Go and watch that video, it's available to you right now. So what have I done in the respec? First, let's talk about the respec. You can see the stats over here, not all resistances are capped. One thing is, before the respec, I can tell you that as you reach the end game, and it's a dark kind of statement, but resistances are very important. I was largely neglecting them and simply overpowering stuff with damage up to the end game point through the campaign. But I have to say that if your resistances are not capped, you will start dying more and more and more and more, especially to challenging kind of bosses and mini bosses such as your nemesis on the maps. And you would know what it is by now if you kind of leveled up to this point. Alright, so Sentinel has not changed all that much, but I have I respect, and I have done it in a little bit more kind of conservative way. So I invested into vitality and health regeneration. I've invested a little bit into block effectiveness. I've invested a little bit into chance to gain health when I block. Did I need this exact thing, and am I blocking much throughout the leveling as I reached end game? No, but only when I had a two-hander equipped. Now, when I'll show you both different specs with a shield, I do block a lot more, so I suppose this becomes a lot more valuable. Vast majority of points obviously is in the Void Knight. I already mentioned Erasing Strike, and the two ways to play this build is one, investing into spell damage, void spell damage, and basically relying almost solely on the Devouring Orb, and spoiler alert, that's how I enjoy to play. And another one is by using Erasing Strike, kinda, if not on rotation, then at the very least fairly regularly when you get a lot of enemies around you. Devouring Orb is chipping away at them, the auto-bombing capability, and you just slam them with Erasing Strike. That depends on your weapon, okay? That depends on your weapon, so please keep this in mind. We will come back to this, I promise. Alright, Devouring Blade obviously maxed, increased damage, health regen, void damage maxed. Void waves, throwing void damage doesn't matter, but spell void damage matters a lot because we're using Devouring Orb, and Devouring Orb is a spell, obviously. World Eater is okay because melee damage was leached as health and void damage is leached as health. Okay, melee damage we're not doing much right now, but 3% of leached damage as health for spell damage is not terrible, especially with the increased leech rate over there for 5 points bonus, alright? Okay, I'm still a big fan of Temporal Velocity for both the 5-point bonus, so Devouring Orb summons Void Rifts, as well as Vitality and increased cooldown recovery speed by a quarter almost. That's fantastic. I started unlocking Essence of the End and I'm planning to max it out. That is us getting Void Essence on kill, increased chance of getting it, and it increases your damage basically when you have it. That's great. We have here increased vitality, increased health, needless to say that's important. Kind of pinnacle here for me is the Dread form, because it's massively increased voice damage again, and move speed is increased too. So that's kind of loose layout. Now in terms of the skills that I've unlocked and that I'm relying on, let's take a look at the skills, of course. I still have Warpath, and I am absolutely planning to unspec out of it. I just haven't picked anything that would be worthy of replacing it with. That's why it wasn't a priority for me. I simply stopped using it, especially as I personally switched away from using a two-hander to using a one-hander and a shield, as I will show to you in a second. I promise, if you are getting impatient, just use the chapters. Erasing Strike is still bread and butter. Erasing Strike is a fantastic ability. I haven't changed the spec of Erasing Strike much, so it's still the same. It's Ariesh's Fall, it's Dematerialize, it's Twin Cataclysm so that you have 2 charges of the Erasing Strike. It's all this kind of stuff. You can pause the video and take a screenshot if that tickles your fancy. Bread and butter remains on the Devouring Orb, absolutely. Devouring Orb has Dark Moon, which is circling us, the Devouring Orb. We are using Extinction, we are using Cosmic Impact, we are increasing the damage of Devouring Orb, really, my friends, as well as we are absolutely still having the Abyssal Emission, where we're spawning Abyssal Orbs, the heat-seeking missiles, so to speak, the ones that are hitting the enemies all around us. And yeah, that is important, as well as the Chaotic Torrent, which increases the frequency at which Abyssal Orb is spawned. That's probably all there is to say here. I was a bit tentative and a little bit uncertain explaining to you why I still have the anomaly in this build, and quite honestly to you, I simply forgot exactly what was driving this decision when I was playing this build a couple of years ago in beta, ages ago, right? Okay, anomaly does damage, and anomaly makes the enemy travel into the future and then returns it into the past as it takes the a certain amount of damage. I'm not claiming that this specific skill, anomaly, is spec'd the right way, but to me this spec made sense. Once again, feel free to pause the video right now and figure it out if this makes sense to you. I took Tides of Time and I drove it to Reflection. I also am starting to use Abyssal Echoes. Abyssal Echoes are this echoing chaining effect. You basically, it's a damage over time thing. You throw it on the enemies, it does area of effect damage, and I quite like it. I'm currently experimenting with Impair the Weak, which basically we are converting the damage into instant one. Why? Rather than over time. Because over time takes time. And maybe later into the end game the enemies are thick enough for this damage to need to tick on them for a little bit longer, but right now I feel like I'm benefiting a lot more from the instant damage being dealt. Once again, I'm very much not pretending to be an expert on this particular element, so I'm welcoming your feedback in case you actually have something constructive to say about this, okay? Otherwise, it's a solid enough spec right now, as you see on the screen, demonstrated to you. It's performing really, really well. I think that's it about the skills. Now let's talk about the gear, as promised. There are 2 ways for you to build it. Well, first of all, you obviously are maximizing all of your resistances and void damage. That's the main thing you are maximizing. As well as you're on the lookout to maximize your spell damage wherever you can. Because Devouring Orb is both the void and it's a spell. Okay, so first of all, if you are playing this in a melee kind of hybrid spec, still this build, then you would benefit from a drop such as Shadow Beacon. I was very lucky, it's a solo self-found character. I didn't buy this, but you could buy this from the market, okay? Shadow Beacon speaks for itself. Massive void damage increase, spell void damage increase, so it's not just melee, as well as +2 to void skills, and decreases the amount of mana that Erasing Strike costs. If I, even right now, not being in the map, mouse over the Erasing Strike, you can see that Erasing Strike right now, with the Scepter and the Shield, shows to you the projected damage of about 7,000. If I put right now Shadow Beacon into my hand here, let's just for humor, let's take a look. Take a look at this, boom! Look at the increase that Shadow Beacon does for the Erasing Strike. It's incredible, it's incredible. However, Devouring Orb with the Shadow Beacon does 7,700 damage, and if I return to this setup with a shield and a scepter, Devouring Orb does quite a bit more. Not quite as dramatic increase, but substantial increase. Extra almost 2,000 damage points. That's quite a lot if you like more passive gameplay. So again, it's about your luck. Do you have a good one-hander and a good shield? That gives you more defensives, 100%. You will be blocking more, a lot of other stuff is happening. Or do you have an amazing two-hander such as Shadow Beacon? Because the decision is then kinda made for you how you want to play it. With Shadow Beacon, even Warpath still makes sense, but without Shadow Beacon it doesn't so much. Now let's take a look finally at my Scepter. Not the best thing in the world, but take a look at this. 151% increased void damage. That's freaking amazing, so you need to be on the lookout for items like this all the time. I was also tremendously lucky to get Defiance of the Forgotten Knight, unfortunately not the matching sword just yet, but that also has a massively increased void damage, great block chance, chance to inflict Time Rot, which is the void damage over time ability, increases melee void damage, less important to us, and less void damage taken on block, quite a lot less damage taken on void block. So these are kind of main things. The rest of it is, as you can see, increased void damage, increased level of devouring orb if you can, increased void damage. That is what you're forging, that's what you're using your forge for as well, whenever you can. That's it, my friends. The idols, again, I'm not too proud of them, but again, where I can increase void damage, I do. I kind of just ignore other stats, but that's what I kind of do. And that is it. That is the, let's call it, start of the end game. Very confident start of the end game. Super enjoying it. It's destroying everything. It's freaking amazing, this build. Welcoming your input, welcoming your suggestions on how to maybe play with Anomaly versus Abyssal Echoes and other kind of stuff, but Devouring Orb is slaughtering absolutely everything. If you like Last Epoch, if you like this kind of casual, unpretentious content, please don't leave without leaving me a quick like, especially if you watched the whole video. You're really important to me, I really appreciate you. And more content is coming. Thank you for watching, hopefully you enjoy Autobomber Void Knight, and I'll talk to you next time.